Steve Harvey was having what seemed like a typical Friday afternoon taping when something extraordinary began to unfold. The Martinez family from Phoenix was facing off against the Thompson family from Dallas, and the energy in the studio was electric. But Steve had no idea he was about to witness one of the most incredible family reunions in the show's history. The Martinez family stood confidently at their positions. At the center was 63-year-old Carmen Martinez, a retired school librarian with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and warm brown eyes that crinkled when she smiled. Next to her stood her husband Roberto, a jovial man who owned a small chain of Mexican restaurants. Their 3 adult children completed the team: Sophia, a nurse practitioner; Miguel, a high school coach; and Isabella, a graphic designer. "All right, Martinez family, welcome to Family Feud," Steve said with his characteristic enthusiasm. "Carmen, tell me about your beautiful family here." Carmen's face lit up. "Well, Steve, we've been married 39 years next month. Roberto swept me off my feet at a church dance, and I've been trying to get him to dance again ever since." The audience laughed as Roberto shrugged good-naturedly. "My knees aren't what they used to be. But for you, mi amor, I'll always try." "That's what I'm talking about," Steve said. "And Sophia, what about you, following in the helping profession?" Sophia stepped forward slightly. "Yes, I work in pediatrics. Actually, both my sisters are in healthcare too." "Both your sisters?" Steve asked. "But I only see Isabella here." A shadow crossed Carmen's face for just a moment. "I have another daughter, Patricia, but she lives in Seattle. And—" She paused, her voice catching slightly. "I haven't seen my sister in 55 years. Steve's expression shifted to one of genuine concern. 55 years. What happened?" Carmen took a breath. "It's a long story, but the short version is, our parents separated when we were young. I was 8, and Rosa was 6. My father took a job in Mexico City, and my mother had gotten a nursing position in Los Angeles. They decided, well, they thought it would be temporary, that Rosa would go with Mom to California, and I'd go with Dad to Mexico." "They thought it would be temporary," Roberto added, putting his arm around his wife. "But life got complicated." "That's right," Carmen continued. "Dad's job kept getting extended. Mom's nursing program was intense. They kept saying next summer or next Christmas, but the visits never happened. Then Mom remarried and moved to Seattle. Dad remarried too. Letters got lost, phone numbers changed. This was before internet, before cell phones. By the time I was old enough to try to find her on my own, I didn't even know her married name." The audience was completely quiet, hanging on every word. Steve moved closer to the family. "So you've been looking for her all this time?" "On and off," Carmen admitted. "I hired a private investigator about 20 years ago, but he couldn't find anything. I tried those reunion websites. Even did one of those DNA tests, but no matches came up. I think about her every single day, especially when I look at my girls. I wonder if she has children, if she's happy, if she remembers me." Isabella reached over and squeezed her mother's hand. "She remembers you, Mom. How could she not?" Steve nodded thoughtfully. "That's a powerful story, Carmen. And you know what? I believe families find their way back to each other when the time is right. Let's play some Family Feud and see if we can't bring you some good fortune today." The game began, and the Martinez family played well. They were clearly close-knit, finishing each other's sentences and celebrating every good answer. During a commercial break, Steve chatted more with Carmen about her search for Rosa. "The hardest part," Carmen said, "is not knowing if she's looking for me too. What if she doesn't want to be found? What if she's angry that I didn't try harder when we were younger?" "You were 8 years old," Steve reminded her gently. "You were both children. No one can blame children for what adults decided." When they returned from commercial, the Martinez family was leading significantly. They'd already won 1 game and were well on their way to winning the second. That's when Steve noticed unusual activity in the production booth. His executive producer was having an animated conversation with someone on a tablet, gesturing excitedly. During the next break, a production assistant hurried over to Steve with a piece of paper. His eyes widened as he read it, and he had to work to keep his expression neutral as they came back from commercial. All right, everybody, before we continue with our game, our producers have just informed me of something extraordinary, Steve began, his voice carrying a weight that made everyone pay attention. Carmen, you mentioned you haven't seen your sister Rosa in 55 years. Carmen nodded, looking confused about why they were bringing this up again. Steve continued, well, it turns out that sometimes the world is smaller than we think. Isabella, tell me about that wedding photo you posted on Instagram last week. Isabella looked surprised. The one from my cousin's wedding? It was just a candid shot I took during the reception. I thought the decorations were beautiful, so I posted it for design inspiration. And that photo went somewhat viral in the wedding planning community, didn't it? Yeah, it got like 50,000 likes. Wedding planners kept sharing it. I was kind of shocked, actually. Steve held up the paper he'd been given. Well, one of those wedding planners who shared it was from Seattle, and one of her followers saw something in that photo that made her heart stop. The audience was leaning forward in their seats. Carmen gripped Roberto's hand tightly. In the background of that photo, sitting at a table, was a woman who looked exactly like someone she'd been searching for her entire adult life. Steve said, Carmen, Rosa saw you in that photo. Carmen's legs seemed to give out, and Miguel quickly steadied his mother. She saw me? Rosa saw me? Not only did she see you, Steve said, his own voice thick with emotion, but she immediately reached out to the wedding planner, who connected her to Isabella, who didn't even know what was happening until our producers called an hour ago. Isabella gasped. That's why they were asking me about my Instagram. Oh my God, Mom. Carmen was crying openly now. Does she want? Carmen, Steve said gently, Rosa is here. Your sister is here right now. The audience erupted in gasps and applause. Carmen covered her face with her hands, her whole body shaking. Roberto held her tightly, tears streaming down his own face. Rosa? Steve called toward the wings. Rosa, come on out here. The woman who walked onto the stage could only be Carmen's sister. Same build, same way of walking, same shape of the face. Her hair was lighter, styled in soft waves, and she wore a simple blue dress. But her eyes, those same warm brown eyes, were fixed on Carmen and filled with 55 years of tears. Carmen? Rosa's voice was barely a whisper. Mi hermana? Carmen let out a sob and ran toward her sister. They met in the center of the stage, colliding in an embrace that seemed to make up for every hug they'd missed. Both women were crying so hard they could barely stand, clinging to each other as if afraid the other might disappear if they let go. I looked for you, Carmen gasped between sobs. I looked for you for so long. I looked too, Rosa cried. Every Rosa Martinez in every phone book, every Facebook, everything. I never stopped looking. They pulled back just enough to look at each other, hands touching each other's faces in wonder. Despite the years, the different lives they'd led, the recognition was instant and complete. You look like Mama, Carmen whispered. You look like Papa, Rosa replied. And they both laughed through their tears. Steve gave them several moments before gently guiding them to sit on the Family Feud steps. The formal game had been completely forgotten. This was about something far more important. Rosa, Steve said softly, tell us your side of this story. Rosa wiped her eyes with a tissue someone had handed her, never letting go of Carmen's hand with her other. When Mama and I moved to Los Angeles, I cried every night for my sister. Mama promised we'd see Carmen and Papa soon, but soon never came. She was working double shifts at the hospital, going to school. Then she met Richard, my stepfather, and we moved to Seattle. She paused, looking at Carmen. I wrote you letters, hundreds of letters, but I guess they never made it to Mexico City. We moved around a lot with Papa's work, Carmen explained. Construction projects all over. I wrote too, but I was sending them to the old address in Los Angeles. By the time I was old enough to search on my own, Mama had passed away, Rosa continued. Breast cancer. She was only 48. Before she died, She told me she regretted every day that she let them separate us. She tried to find you and Papa, but you'd both taken your stepmother's last name, hadn't you? Carmen nodded. Papa thought it would be easier for school, for documents. I became Carmen Delgado for a while, then Martinez, when I married Roberto. I didn't think about how that would make me impossible to find. And I became Rosa Chen when Richard adopted me. Then Rosa Patterson when I married my first husband. And now Rosa Williams, Rosa said. No wonder we couldn't find each other. Steve shook his head in amazement. So all these years, you've both been searching, but life kept putting obstacles in the way. Until a wedding photo on Instagram changed everything. Rosa, tell us about seeing that photo. Rosa's face transformed with the memory. I was just scrolling through Instagram over my morning coffee. My friend Sarah, she's a wedding planner, had shared this beautiful photo of centerpieces. But in the background, I saw a woman laughing, and my heart just stopped. The way she threw her head back when she laughed, the way her hands moved when she was talking, it was like looking at a ghost. That's how I laugh? Carmen asked, demonstrating, and Rosa started crying again. Exactly like that, just like Papa used to. I zoomed in on the photo, and even though 55 years had passed, I knew it was you. I commented on the photo asking who the woman in the background was, but there were so many comments already. So I messaged Sarah directly, and she connected me with the original poster. Which was my Isabella, Carmen said, looking at her daughter with wonder. I didn't know what was happening, Isabella admitted. This woman messages me, saying she thinks her sister is in my photo. I thought it might be some kind of scam at first, but then she sent me a photo of you two as children, and the resemblance was undeniable. Show them the photo, Rosa said eagerly, and Steve's producers quickly pulled it up on the screen behind them. A black and white photograph appeared. Two little girls in matching dresses, holding hands in front of a small house. The older one, clearly Carmen, had her arm protectively around the younger Rosa. They were both grinning at the camera, gap-toothed and carefree. Easter Sunday, 1969. Both sisters said in unison, then looked at each other in amazement. The last photo together, Carmen whispered. Until now, Rosa corrected, and they embraced again. Steve turned to the audience. Now, folks, what you're witnessing here is nothing short of a miracle. Two sisters, separated as children, both searched for each other for decades. And it took modern technology, a simple Instagram post, to bring them back together. Can we bring out Rosa's family? Steve asked. Because Carmen, you're about to meet a whole new set of relatives. Rosa's family emerged from the wings. Her husband James, a tall African-American man with kind eyes and a warm smile, came out first. Behind him were their two sons, Marcus, a software engineer, and David, a chef, and Rosa's daughter, Keisha, a teacher. Carmen, Rosa said, her voice full of pride, meet your nephews and niece. Carmen was crying again as she hugged each of them. I'm an aunt? I have nephews and a niece? And we have an aunt, Marcus said, his voice warm. Mom has talked about you our whole lives. We grew up knowing we had an Aunt Carmen somewhere out there. The two families began to merge on the stage, introducing themselves, marveling at similarities. Miguel and Marcus discovered they were both Lakers fans. Sophia and Keisha bonded over their shared experiences in healthcare and education. Isabella was already showing David photos of her design work on her phone. This is incredible, Roberto said, shaking James's hand. In 5 minutes, our family has doubled in size. How do you like that? James replied with a grin. I always wanted a big family. Steve facilitated more conversation, learning about their parallel lives. Both sisters had married young, divorced, and remarried to find lasting love. Both had 3 children. Both had careers in public service, Carmen as a librarian, Rosa as a social worker. I worked with foster children, Rosa explained. Kids who were separated from their siblings. I guess I was trying to save other kids from what happened to us. And I made sure my library had every book about sisters I could find, Carmen added. I read them all, looking for our story in someone else's words. You both turned your pain into purpose, Steve observed. That's beautiful. The producers had prepared a presentation of parallel moments from their lives. Photos appeared on screen. Both sisters in cap and gown for high school graduation. Different years, different states, but the same proud smile. Both in wedding dresses, Carmen in traditional white, Rosa in a 70s-style bohemian dress, both holding their firstborn children with the same expression of wonder and terror. Look at this. Sophia pointed to photos of both sisters with their eldest children. You're holding us exactly the same way. Some things are in the DNA, Steve said. Speaking of which, Rosa, you mentioned you did DNA tests too? Rosa nodded. Several of them. But, Carmen, did you use your married name for yours? Carmen's eyes widened. Oh my goodness. I didn't even think. And I probably had some information wrong about birth dates or places, because Papa was always vague about those details. That explains why we didn't match in the system, Rosa said. All these years, technology could have helped us, but we were just missing each other by inches. Until Instagram brought you together, Steve said. Now that's a modern miracle. And speaking of miracles, we have some surprises for both families. The producers brought out tablets for both sisters. We've created digital family albums for you both, Steve explained. Every photo your families could find, now shared between you. 55 years of memories you can now share with each other. Both sisters were scrolling through the photos, pointing things out to each other. Oh, look, your Miguel played baseball too. So did my Marcus. Is this your quinceañera? You look just like Mama. This is you with your students? I have almost the same photo with my foster kids. There's something else, Steve continued. Rosa, tell Carmen about the box. Rosa's face grew tender. When Mama died, she left me a box of things she'd saved. Letters you'd written that came after we moved. Photos, little trinkets. She saved everything, hoping someday she could give them to you. I brought it with me. A production assistant brought out a worn cardboard box. Rosa opened it carefully, pulling out yellowed envelopes, childhood drawings, a small bracelet. This is the letter I wrote. For your 9th birthday, Carmen gasped, recognizing her childish handwriting. It came back marked, "Return to sender," and I cried for days. Mama cried too when it arrived after we'd moved, Rosa said. She kept every single one. Look, here's the drawing you made of our dog Pepito. You remember Pepito? Of course I remember Pepito. He slept on our bed every night. You always let him have your pillow. They went through the box together, each item unleashing a flood of memories. The audience watched in respectful silence, many wiping away their own tears. You know what amazes me, Roberto said to James as their wives reminisced. They're talking like no time has passed at all. That's the thing about siblings, James replied. That bond doesn't break. It might stretch, might get tangled up, but it doesn't break. Steve brought the attention back to the full group. Now, we've learned that both families have some interesting parallels. Isabella and Keisha, you both recently got engaged? Both young women held up their hands, showing off engagement rings. Within a month of each other, Isabella said. How crazy is that? And you're both planning weddings for next spring, Steve continued. Well, we think it would be a shame to have 2 separate weddings when you could have one big family celebration. So Family Feud would like to contribute $25,000 toward a joint wedding celebration for these cousins who just met. The families erupted in excitement. Isabella and Keisha looked at each other, then both nodded enthusiastically. Yes, they said in unison. A double wedding? Carmen said. Oh, Rosa, remember how we used to plan our weddings when we were little? Double wedding with matching dresses, Rosa confirmed. We were going to marry brothers so we could live next door to each other. Well, you might not have married brothers, but now your daughters can have that double wedding you dreamed of, Steve said. As the taping continued, more parallels emerged. Both families vacationed at the same lake in California, just different weeks. They'd been to the same concerts, supported the same charities, even had the same unusual family tradition of birthday dinners at Chinese restaurants. Mom always said it was because her sister loved Chinese food, Marcus explained. And I always took my kids because Rosa loved those crispy noodles when we were little, Carmen added. The families were mixing naturally now, finding connections everywhere. Miguel was showing David photos from his coaching career. Sophia was exchanging contact information with Keisha to share teaching resources. The future in-laws were already planning joint family dinners. Before we wrap up, Steve said, I want to ask both of you, what would you say to other people who might be searching for lost family members? Carmen spoke first, her voice strong despite the tears. Never give up. I know it seems hopeless sometimes. I know there were years when I thought I'd never see Rosa again. But keep hoping, keep looking. Technology changes, circumstances change. What seems impossible today might be just an Instagram post away tomorrow. Rosa nodded. And don't let pride or fear stop you. I was so afraid Carmen might be angry with me for not trying harder, for not finding a way to stay in touch. But look at us now. All those years of worry, and all we needed was to find each other to know that the love never went anywhere. It just waited, Carmen finished. It waited for the right moment. Steve was visibly moved. In all my years of hosting this show, I've seen families compete, families celebrate, families support each other through fast money. But today, we've seen a family be born. Two sisters separated by distance and circumstance, brought together by love and determination, and one photographer who happened to catch the right moment at the right angle. Isabella raised her hand. Can I say something? As the person who accidentally made this happen, I just want to say, share your photos. Share your moments. You never know who needs to see them. You never know what miracle might be hiding in the background of your everyday life. Amen to that. Steve agreed. Now, we're going to do something a little different. Both families are going to play fast money together, as one family, because that's what you are now, one family. The combined families moved to the fast money positions. Carmen and Rosa stood together at the podium, hands clasped tightly. Steve asked the questions, but it almost didn't matter what the answers were. Every response was met with cheers from their united family. Every point celebrated as a victory for all of them. When they won, and of course they won, how could the universe not reward such a reunion? The celebration was explosive. $20,000 to be split between the families, but more importantly, a lifetime of separated love finally reunited. As the confetti fell and the families embraced, Steve made his final comments. Ladies and gentlemen, what we've witnessed today is proof that miracles happen. That families separated by oceans and decades can find their way back to each other. That love doesn't diminish with time. It just waits for its moment to shine again. The cameras captured the two sisters standing together, arms around each other, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. 55 years of separation had ended with a single photo, a moment of recognition, and the courage to reach out across the void of time. After the official taping ended, the families lingered on stage, reluctant to separate now that they'd found each other. They made plans. Thanksgiving would be in Phoenix this year, Christmas in Seattle. The kids were already creating a family group chat, sharing phone numbers and social media handles. You know what's funny? Rosa said to Carmen as they finally prepared to leave the studio. I was so nervous on the flight here. I kept thinking, what if we have nothing in common anymore? What if we're strangers? Carmen squeezed her sister's hand. But we're not strangers. We're sisters. We always have been, even when we didn't know where the other was. Every birthday, I lit 2 candles on my cake. I did the same thing, Rosa exclaimed. Roberto used to ask why, and I'd say one was a wish candle. But really, it was for you. Always. They stood there for a moment, 2 women in their 60s who had last seen each other as children, now grandmothers with full lives behind them and precious years ahead to make up for lost time. Promise me something, Carmen said. Promise me we'll never lose each other again. I promise, Rosa said firmly. But more than that, I promise we won't waste a single day we have left. Weekly video calls, monthly visits, every holiday together. Our grandchildren will grow up knowing their whole family. The way we should have, Carmen agreed. As they walked off the stage together, their families trailing behind in animated conversation, Steve Harvey watched from his position by the game board. His production team was already discussing how to edit this incredible episode, but Steve was thinking about something else. In a world that often seemed divided, where families were scattered by circumstances beyond their control, moments like this reminded him why family mattered. Not just the family you were born into, but the family you chose, the family you fought to find, the family you refused to give up on. The Martinez-Williams-Chen-Patterson family, NB. Because they were all one family now, left the studio different than they'd entered. They'd come as two separate units, playing a game show. They left as one united clan, proof that love could overcome time, distance, and every obstacle life threw in the way. Later that evening, in their hotel, Carmen and Rosa sat up talking until dawn. They filled in the gaps, the schools attended, the friends made, the heartbreaks survived, the triumphs celebrated. They showed each other photos of grandchildren, shared recipes their children loved, talked about their husbands and their gardens and their favorite books. I became a librarian, Carmen said at one point, because libraries were where I went to feel less alone. All those stories about families, about sisters finding each other again. I think I was always looking for our story. And I became a social worker specializing in keeping siblings together in foster care, Rosa replied. Every time I prevented a separation, I felt like I was fixing our story a little bit. They discovered they both loved mystery novels. Both made the same arroz con leche recipe their mother had taught them. Both had the same habit of humming when they were nervous. They had different political views on some things, different tastes in music, different approaches to parenting, but these differences just made their conversations richer, gave them more to explore about each other. You know what I regret most? Rosa said as the sun began to rise over Seattle. All the conversations we didn't get to have, all the advice we couldn't give each other. When I got divorced, when you lost your job that time, when our kids were teenagers and driving us crazy, we should have been there for each other. We're here now, Carmen said firmly. And our kids are still driving us crazy sometimes, so there's plenty of advice still to give. They laughed, that identical laugh that had given Rosa the first clue in the wedding photo. Over the following weeks, the family stayed in constant contact. The group chat was active daily, filled with photos, jokes, planning messages for their upcoming gatherings. Isabella and Keisha threw themselves into planning their double wedding with enthusiasm, bouncing ideas off each other and their newly discovered cousine sisters. The wedding, held the following spring, was everything two little girls in 1969 had dreamed of and more. Carmen and Rosa walked their daughters down the aisle together, wearing matching dresses in different colors, a deliberate echo of those Easter dresses from their last photo together as children. During the reception, they recreated that childhood photo, standing in the same poses, holding hands the same way. The photographer captured it perfectly. Two sisters who had traveled long, separate roads to find their way back to each other. The speech Carmen gave at the wedding became legendary in family lore. 56 years ago, Rosa and I stood in matching dresses and promised we'd be sisters forever. We didn't know that life was about to test that promise in ways we couldn't imagine. But here's what I learned. Sisters aren't just the people who share your childhood. They're the people who share your heart. And even when we were on opposite sides of the country, living different lives, that shared heart kept beating, kept hoping, kept searching. Today, as we watch our daughters marry the loves of their lives, surrounded by a family that wouldn't exist if we hadn't found each other again, I know that every year apart was worth it for this moment together. Rosa's addition was equally moving. They say you can't go home again, but they're wrong. Home isn't a place, it's a person. It's the sister who knew you before you knew yourself. It's the family that multiplies when you're brave enough to keep looking. Carmen was my first friend, my first protector, my first loss, and now my greatest gift regained. To our children, who brought us back together, to technology that made it possible, and to the love that never let us stop looking. This is what family really means. The two families settled into their new expanded reality. Birthdays were bigger. Holidays were louder. Sunday dinners required longer tables. The grandchildren grew up thinking it was perfectly normal to have cousins who felt more like siblings, aunts who acted like grandmothers, and a family story that sounded like a movie but was really just life, finding a way to heal old wounds. Carmen and Rosa talked every morning over coffee, a ritual that became as essential as breathing. They traveled together, finally taking that sister's vacation they'd planned as children. They supported each other through Roberto's heart surgery and James's retirement struggles. They became not just the sisters they'd been born as, but the friends they'd chosen to become. On the 5th anniversary of their reunion, the whole family gathered again. This time it was for a different kind of celebration. And the birth of Isabella's first child, a daughter she named Elena Rosa, after both her aunt and her mother. As Carmen held her great niece while Rosa looked on, they marveled at how complete their circle had become. From two little girls separated by circumstances beyond their control, to grandmothers surrounded by a loving, chaotic, beautiful blended family. Their journey had been long, but the destination was worth every moment of the trip. "You know what I think," Rosa said, watching their children and grandchildren fill Roberto and Carmen's backyard with laughter. "I think we were meant to be apart for those years." Carmen looked at her in surprise. "Really? Think about it. If we'd grown up together, we'd have one family between us. But because we grew up apart, we each built our own families, and now we have all of this." She gestured at the crowd of relatives. "We didn't lose anything. We gained everything." Carmen considered this, then smiled. "You always were the philosopher, and you always were the optimist. Together, we make one pretty good person." "We always did," Rosa agreed. "Even when we were in different places, we were still two halves of the same whole." As the sun set on another family gathering, Carmen and Rosa sat together on the porch swing Roberto had installed specifically for their sister talks. Their children bustled around them, their grandchildren played in the yard, their husbands debated sports with their sons-in-law. Life was full, life was good, and life was complete. "Same time next week?" Rosa asked as the evening wound down. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Carmen replied. And she never did. Because when you've spent 55 years missing your sister, you don't take a single moment for granted. Every phone call is precious. Every visit is a gift. Every shared laugh is a miracle. The Instagram photo that started it all remained framed in both their houses. Not the wedding photo itself, but a screenshot of the moment Rosa had seen it, complete with her comment, "Is this my sister Carmen?" Below it, Isabella had added a simple caption, "Yes. And she's been waiting for you." In the end, their story wasn't about the years they'd lost. It was about the love that survived, the hope that persisted, and the proof that it's never too late for families to find their way home to each other. All it takes is one moment of recognition, one leap of faith, and the courage to believe that some bonds can't be broken by time, distance, or circumstance. They were sisters. They always had been. They always would be. And now, finally, they could be sisters together, making up for lost time one shared moment at a time, building new memories to stack alongside the old ones, and proving that family isn't just about blood or proximity or shared history. It's about choosing to love, choosing to search, and choosing to never give up on the people who matter most. The photo that brought them together became famous in its own right, shared thousands of times with captions about miracles and fate and the power of never giving up. But for Carmen and Rosa, it was simply the moment their lives stopped being parallel lines and finally intersected again, creating a beautiful tangle of family that would never again be pulled apart.